significant spending cuts.
But the two parties still have their differences, namely what to do about the looming expiration of the Bush tax cuts. I'm joined now by Vermont Democratic Congressman Peter Welch. Congressman, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, following Friday's meeting, all four leaders seem very confident that a deal will be struck. The question is, do you share their optimism?
Well, I do feel better now that we're back and the election's behind us. There was a new mood in Washington. Before the election, the framework for discussion was all cuts and no revenues. Now the framework has changed. The American people made it very clear that revenues have to be part of a balanced deal. The Republican leadership, Mr. Boehner, has indicated that he's putting revenues on the table. So that makes it possible for us to begin the very difficult discussion about what revenues and how do you get them, and what cuts and how do you make them. So we've got a lot of work to do, but at least the framework gives some greater possibility for a positive outcome.
Now, last time around, Republicans insisted that any new increases in revenue must be offset by a lowering of tax rates. Are you encouraged by the GOP's apparent new willingness to accept a more balanced approach?
I'm very much encouraged by it. I mean, that is what made it impossible for us to even have discussions at all up until the election results came in. Because, as you know, President Obama ran on a very explicit platform of restoring the Clinton-era tax rates for folks above $250,000. Romney explicitly ran against that. Exit polls showed that half the folks who voted for Romney, in fact, supported the Obama position on taxes. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, our Congress actually has made $1.5 trillion in cuts. So I think it's important for Mr. Boehner to acknowledge that a lot of the cut side of this has been done, and we really do have to make certain that revenues are a significant part of a balanced approach to a long-term stable debt reduction.
Now, this bipartisan spirit is very different from what we saw during the debt ceiling deal. What's changed from then to now?
Well, two things, and this is actually from talking to some of my colleagues in conservative districts. They were hearing the same thing I was hearing, and that is, Peter, why don't you guys get together and get something done? So one message from, I think, our voters, even the conservative and liberal, was, look, you guys got to work together, you got to get something done. The second message that was very clear is revenues do have to be part of the equation. So that, as I say, gives us some room for optimism. What's going to be tough is that once we are required, or actually Mr. Boehner's required to move beyond general platitudes about revenues being on the table and get specific, where he in effect has to show the president the money, that's when you're going to get an enormous amount of backlash in the Republican conference. And that's the aspect of this that makes me somewhat skeptical about our ability to get a deal before December 31.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how things shake out. Congressman Peter Welch, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
And still ahead, one big-name GOP strategist is using a pretty nasty term to describe Mitt Romney's run for the White House.